Hello y'all, this is RJ, live in the National Museum of the United States Army. This is located at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, just about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. This is broken up into multiple different areas. Right now I'm starting this video off in the war between the states, also known as the Civil War area.
In September 1862, Lee attempted to change the course of the war by invading England.
So walking through here just briefly, you can see how this is designed. So you start on the far end over here on the left side, which is basically listed as the founding of the nation, which is part of the American Revolution. This section right here is called Preserving the Nation. I think it was a misnomer how it's presented, but this is the so-called Civil War, war between the states. And the next one over here is World War I, and then further down World War II, and then the other global wars, Cold Wars, and the modern wars. And this is all at the, as you see here, the U.S. Museum of the United States Army. You can see the outside, what it looks like. This is the building we're in. So I'm going to walk through here right now. This section right here starts with the Mexican-American War, or the Mexican War. And you see right here, as you enter, two portraits, one of General Robert E. Lee and one of Grant. This is Grant and Lee in the Mexican War. Grant and Lee both served in the Mexican War, where they observed large troop formations in battle. Robert E. Lee was an engineer on Winfield Scott's staff during the campaign from Veracruz to Mexico City. Ulysses S. Grant was a regimental quartermaster for the 4th U.S. Infantry during battles in northern Mexico. Although they met only once, both men gained valuable combat experience that they would put to good use during the Civil War. Lee saw firsthand how Scott maneuvered his large army, while Grant learned the fundamentals of logistics. Like as you come in here, you see the federal flag and also the first national Confederate flag representing the 7 stars, the original first 7 states. And here you see the portraits of those who were who went to West Point. And it speaks about it right here. Former Army comrades found themselves choosing sides. As war clouds gathered over the nation, more than 1/4 of the U.S. Army's 1,000 officers resigned to serve the Confederacy. They formed a corps of experienced leaders who trained and organized the Confederate Army. Subsequently, officers who had been West Point classmates were comrades in the Mexican War and served together on the Western frontier, found themselves on opposing sides, in some battles facing brother. So you see here, those like Joseph Wheeler right here. He's buried there at Arlington National Cemetery. I believe the largest single obelisk to a single person is to Joseph Wheeler. He was a general in both the U.S. Army and the Confederate Army. So he's actually a Confederate general first, and then after the war, the U.S. government asked him to serve as a U.S. Army officer as well. So you see others, for example, Samuel Ferguson.
It started in darkness. Before dawn on 12 April 1860,
Maraduke,
began bombarding Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor,
Smith, George Holt. It just kind of goes on like this.
The Union's commanding general, Winfield Scott, pushed for the Anaconda Plan.
So I'm going to share some of these artifacts with you here real soon, but just very briefly, giving you a glimpse of what the video says here at the very beginning.
The Northerners objected to the slow pace of the plan. In July, the Union Army marched into Virginia. A bloody clash of
Just capturing a short moment here with this video, then I'll continue on to some other relics and artifacts and some of the other displays that are here as well.
This war would not be easy, and it would not be short. There would be three theaters in the Civil War. The east, between the Atlantic and the Appalachians. The west, stretching from the Appalachians to the Mississippi. And the Trans-Mississippi Theater, west of the Mississippi River. In the west, 1862 began well for the Union. General Ulysses S. Grant captured two forts in northern Tennessee that controlled the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers, clearing the way to invade the South. In April, Grant's army was camping quietly around a small log church named Charlotte. The Confederates launched a surprise attack that rolled through Grant's lines. The fight was confused, desperate, and savage. The next day, Grant pushed back, forcing the Confederates to retreat, opening the way for the Union invasion of the southern heartland. By mid-1862, only the strongholds of Vicksburg and Port Hudson blocked the Union on the Mississippi, and the blockade of Confederate ports had already begun to strangle the South. But the East was a very different story. In June 1862, Robert E. Lee became commander of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. The Union had many advantages: more guns, more men, more supplies. But for 2 years, Lee defeated a series of unsuccessful Union generals. In September 1862, Lee attempted to change the course of the war by invading the North. But his secret plans fell into Union hands. In the single bloodiest day of fighting in United States history, at Antietam Creek, Lee had no choice but to retreat to Virginia. The next summer, Lee tried again. In June 1863, his men crossed the border into Pennsylvania. Gettysburg. Over 3 days in July, Lee attacked the Army of the Potomac under General George G. Lee, and failed to dislodge him. Lee withdrew his battered army into Virginia. Just 1 day later, 4 July 1863, Ulysses S. Grant took the stronghold of Vicksburg, Mississippi.
I'm here in the U.S. National Museum of the U.S. Army, right here.
That same fateful summer, at Chickamauga, Union General William S. Rose
Just sharing with you this brief little clip from the U.S. Army so you can see how it's presented here. I'm going to move on to some of their artifacts and relics and displays here real soon.
In November, Grant smashed Confederate lines at Chattanooga, seizing vital railroad lines, the gateway to the Deep South stronghold. In 1864, casualties mounted rapidly on both sides. In March, Ulysses S. Grant became commanding general of the United States Army. Grant appointed William T. Sherman to commanding general, military division of Mississippi. Sherman took Atlanta and ravaged his way towards Savannah, destroying barns, railroad lines, warehouses, bridges, mills, factories. He marched to the sea and turned north. Meanwhile, Grant came after William Virginia, using both clever tactical ploys and sledgehammer advances, always trying to slip between Lee's army and Richmond. Grant fought massive battles of attrition at the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor. Grant's losses were unprecedented. He was squeezing the life out of his enemy. In June 1864, Grant crossed the James River, forcing Lee back into fortifications around the vital railroad line of Petersburg. In the spring of 1865, Lee was forced to evacuate Petersburg. Richmond fell at last. On 9 April, Lee surrendered the small remnant of his army to Grant in McLean House, Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. Other Confederate troops surrendered in North Carolina, Alabama, and Texas soon followed. After 4 years, the U.S. Army had defeated the armed rebellion by the Southern States. The Union had survived the greatest threat in its history. After the Confederate defeat, the U.S. Army occupied the South for over 10 years to impose order restore stability, oversee reconstruction.
Okay, I just wanted to share that with you just so you can see how it was presented here. And we can definitely see some Yankee propaganda, right? But I would say in general, more fair than some other museums I've been to here at the U.S. Army of National Museum of the U.S. Army here in Fort Belvoir, just about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. So I'm going to do walk around here, but this is definitely, of course, as expected, it's U.S. Army, so most of this entire display is U.S. Army related. Just very few Confederate related artifacts. But there are a few. I was going to share some of these. But if you ever come through here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through this section. This section is devoted to war between the states, Lincoln's War on Americans, I call it, the so-called Civil War. But I am going to move on and show you the other displays because this is broken up where you start off on the one end of the American Revolution, you work your way over to modern warfare. But if you come through here, you'll see everything from things like this. Here's General McClellan's binoculars right here. Officers' belts, swords, infantry tactics, army life type things right here. You see right here, typical gear, the haversack, knapsack, scabbard. So you got right here the pattern waist belt. Number 2, the pattern percussion cap. Right, let me see. Right here is the bayonet, you see. This one, let's see, right here. Here's the haversack. Let's see. Here's the knapsack. Here is the canteen, and so forth. Different artifacts coming through here. Section here. U.S. colored troops, Civil War medals, rifles. I'm just sharing this with you just briefly, just walking through here. There's another video. Here's one interesting artifact. This is the actual kepi used by General Grant right here. So because we're in the National Museum of the United States Army right now, that's what it looks like on the outside. Of course, it's going to be almost entirely U.S. Army artifacts. But there are a few Confederate artifacts, and I'll share those with you as well here real soon. But you can see right here, the Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant's kepi. You see that video playing in the background. But yeah, no doubt about it. This is a Union perspective, right? But there is some fairness here, I would say. For example, I'm glad they didn't gloss over too much. I mean, they definitely glossed over it to a point. But there is some commentary about this being total war. It's total war against Americans, of course. And sections on how the destruction.
2 months later, he became a brigadier general and was promoted to Major General in February 1862. Ulysses S. Grant was quiet.
Here you got some more uniforms.
He was an able strategist and a decisive leader, calm in the battle. By 1864, he captured 2 Confederate armies at Fort Donelson and Vicksburg.
This right here, I'm not sure whose hat that is. Caesar Petersburg, how the Union Army came through and they burned. This was total war. So I'm glad that is mentioned here. And just as Sherman said here, I am to knock Joseph Johnston and to do as much damage to the resources of the enemy as possible. Of course, it wasn't just that. It was demoralizing the Americans as well. So just going through each of these displays really quickly, you see all kinds of things like carbines, muskets, sabers. Right there. Over here, some other artifacts, like here's a haversack. You can see this haversack. You can see the vent, this vent punch, priming wire, and lanyard here. Here is a 3-inch canister. A Hotchkiss shell. You see a 12-pounder case shot right here. See a 12-pound solid shot right here. And some just gruesome photographs here. For example, this man right here is a Union soldier during the Petersburg campaign, posing in front of a Confederate picket post after capturing Fort Monroe. We're looking at this run right here. A mini ball damage. It says, during the fighting near Petersburg in March 1865, a mini ball hit Private George Ruckus of the 7th New York Volunteers in the right thigh, shattering his femur. So he has a shattered femur right there. You can imagine how painful that would have been. Of course, the question is, what the South had is, why are you New Yorkers down here attacking us in our homeland? Go back home. Here's another brutal, check this out right here. This is actually a bone with a mini ball stuck in it, and it speaks about it right here. Private Thomas Rourke was wounded on 3rd of August, 1864, while fighting with Company F, the 1st Maryland Volunteers in Petersburg. Rourke died nearly 2 months later at the age of 25. His knee bone, marked MM 1558, was collected for study. So here is his knee bone with a tibia with a lodged mini ball lodged in his bone for study. That reminds me, if you ever have a chance to go to the medical museum, it's part of the National Museum of Medicine. It's on the north side of Washington, D.C., and that place is something else. It's just the remains, lots of bones, mostly from the war between the states, and so much just what those mini balls and what the explosions and what the fragments would do to a body and to bone. So lots of examples of skulls with shells right through skulls and bones shattered and everything else. They actually have on display there the actual bullet that killed Abraham Lincoln and other artifacts like that. They have, Major Wirtz, who was the Andersonville commandant. They took a part of his vertebrae, and it's on display there. So parts and pieces of his body are on display there. It's really something else. Here is tourniquets and surgical cases and instrument kits and so forth right here. So once again, if you're just joining me, I'm at the National Museum of the United States Army right now. I'm in the section for the war between the states, or the Civil War. So just sharing with you what you'd expect to see if you come over here. This is about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. So you can see here, you got haversack, canteen, fife, artillery bugle right here, a snare drum, a single flag, and so forth. Right here you got a torch with a flame shade and a signal rocket right there. Got some couple regiment flags over here. Here's one regiment flag. Then I'm going to walk over and we can go listen in to the other video that's presented here, so you can get a feel for how is the war presented here at the U.S. Naval Museum, or the National Museum.
On the 9th of March, 1864, President Abraham Lincoln
So let's go listen in and let's go watch how the video presents the war between the states here at the National Museum of the United States Army. So I'm we'll watch this for a little bit and then we'll move on. I'll move on to the other sections.
After helping to train and organize volunteers, he was appointed colonel of the 21st Illinois Infantry Regiment in June 1861. 2 months later, he became a brigadier general and was promoted to major general in February 1862. Ulysses S. Grant was quiet and unassuming, but he was an able strategist and a decisive leader, calm even in the heat of battle. By 1864, he captured 2 Confederate armies at Fort Donelson and Vicksburg and routed a third at Chattanooga, and his country needed him. The Army of the Potomac had twice stopped Robert E. Lee's invasion into Union territory, but repeatedly failed to defeat Lee in Virginia. But now, Lincoln had the general who could win the war. The president had shrugged off criticism aimed at Grant. "He fights," Lincoln said. In March of 1864, Grant became the 2nd lieutenant general in American history. By mid-April, Grant had his plan. He saw that the Confederacy had 2 main armies, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of Tennessee in northern Georgia. Each army defended a vital city, Richmond and Atlanta. The main Union efforts would target those armies and those cities. Grant, the overall commander, oversaw the Eastern Theater, while his subordinate, William T. Sherman, ran the Western Theater. For the first time, the Union armies in East and West could move according to a single coordinated plan. The object was to crush the Confederacy's ability to wage war, to destroy the economy of the South, cut off supplies from enemy troops, starve and shrink the 2 enemy armies. Attrition could be as effective as annihilation. In the field, the thrust of Grant's generalship was pressure, constant pressure. "That man," warned Confederate General James Longstreet, "will fight us every day and every hour till the end of the war." For Grant had a simple creed: find out where your enemy is, get at him as soon as you can, and strike him as hard as you can, and keep moving on. In May 1864, Grant moved against Lee. Over 2 days, the armies met at the Battle of the Wilderness, a close and desperate fight in the tangled Virginia woods. The 2 sides clashed at Spotsylvania Courthouse, at Yellow Tavern, at Cold Harbor. It was a murderous month. Union casualties were a stunning 55,000 men. But Grant kept moving forward. "I propose to fight it out on this line, if it takes all summer," said Grant. But Grant could replace his losses. Lee had no such resources. Lee now had one thought: keep from being pinned down. Finally, in mid-June 1864, Grant crossed the James River and forced Lee back into fortifications around Petersburg. The final siege was on. It would last until April 1865. Grant charged Sherman with carrying out his strategy in the West, directly targeting the Southern economy, its supply lines, its ability to fight. Sherman took 90,000 men and marched toward Atlanta in May 1864. In July, he faced off against General John B. Hood outside the city. Sherman defeated him 3 times and took Atlanta in early September. Then Sherman began the offensive that would make him famous in the North, infamous in the South. "I can make Georgia howl," he said. He abandoned his supply line and marched 60,000 men to the sea. His men lived off the land and scorched the earth. It was a new kind of strategy: total war. "War is cruelty, and you cannot refine it," Sherman said. By the end of December, Sherman had taken Savannah and turned north. By spring 1865, the South had decisively lost the war and its bid for independence. Sherman's hard hand of war then ruined South Carolina. Lee was trapped in Virginia. In late March, Confederate General Joe Johnston attacked Sherman near Bentonville, North Carolina. When Johnston retreated, the last chance for the South was gone. In early April, the Confederates evacuated Richmond. "If the thing is pressed, I think Lee will surrender," General Philip Sheridan wrote to Grant. On the 9th of April, 1865, the two commanders met at Appomattox Courthouse to discuss surrender. Grant offered generous terms of surrender. Lee accepted them. After the drenching bloodshed, there would be healing. No cheering, no firing salutes. No Confederate soldier would be sent to prison. They could just go home, keep their horses, and they would even be given rations. The two great generals of North and South saluted each other, and Lee rode away.
All right, just wanted to share this with you, that video clip here at once again, the National Museum of the United States Army here at Fort Belvoir. Fort Belvoir is a U.S. Army base about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. Just sharing with you this part. I'm going to continue on to the other sections. Of course, most of the artifacts here deal with U.S. Army, as expected, but there are just a few other relics as well. This right here is a Confederate national flag, of course. Looks like the second national flag. It says several regiments in the Confederate Army of Tennessee carried colors of this type. This flag was acquired during the Atlanta campaign. There's a Confederate sword. It says this particular sword right here was captured with those who were with President Jefferson Davis when he was captured at Irwinville, Georgia, back on 10 May 1865. So this sword right here was with Jefferson Davis when he was captured. And you see the gauntlets right here. Gauntlets, these belong to actually Joshua Chamberlain. Little section here for Andersonville. I was just over there at Point Lookout, Maryland, and there was a POW camp for Confederates, and it was just as brutal.
After the Confederate defeat, the U.S. Army occupied the South for over 10 years.
All right, so just this is a section right here. This right here was, you see, this is laid out. So this section right here was dedicated to the war between the states, and they labeled this as preserving the nation. It's kind of a misnomer, not really a great representation, because the Confederacy was not trying to destroy the Union. They just want to be left alone and separate. So this was the founding of the nation, so you can expect this is going to be American Revolution related stuff right here. So neat little colonial warfare, a few little artifacts right here. Some muskets and drums and horns, and pretty cool. Cool uniforms as well. Here's a private in the 1st Maryland Regiment right here. Oh, this is creating the Continental Army. Right here, a horseman's saber. Here's a section on Articles of Confederation. Really, if you're wondering where the Confederacy really got its name from, it was the first government of America, shortly after the Declaration of Independence. section on Nathaniel Green. So, some odds and ends, little artifacts here, like for example the tin mess plate, horn spoon. Spoons haven't changed much over the years, have they? A tinned iron canteen. You can see here a haversack. Got a haversack right here and a knapsack right here. And of course you got this is a wooden canteen actually. A bayonet, scabbard, cartridge box right here. Right here you see a dragoon saber. It's a British short land musket right there. Got the British bayonet. And some other odds and ends, things like this compass right here. An entrenching hoe. Things like this, an amputation saw. Some surgeon, medical related things right here.
Tensions have been mounting.
It's kind of going through this relatively quick. See this display right here as well. It's a 6-pounder. And a few uniforms as well. Of course, this is the American Revolution section. So this right here is a Lieutenant Legion of the United States. A few more artifacts over here. I'm not gonna look at all of them right now, but just quickly going through and taking a look at some of these cool artifacts and relics. So, for example, officer's chapeau, horse pistol. A little commentary about the burning of the nation's capital back in 1814. And the defenses of Fort McHenry right here, a little commentary about that. But you see some of these officer swords right here. And another knapsack. And you see right here a powder horn. Very cool. You see like this right here, a rifleman's cap and a leather neck stock. Cool. Nice. So you see how this is laid out. This is like the first section. So it starts here with the American Revolution early on in this section. This is all displays for the American Revolution. And then I started the video right here at the Civil War, so-called Civil War. I call it the uncivil war, or the war between the states, or Lincoln's War on Americans, or War for Southern Independence, or War of Northern Aggression, and keep going on. But so here is the section we just walked through. I just started the video right through here. Right. This is the area, Army and Society. In fact, what I'll do is, since I'm here, I'll walk through this real quickly. And basically, this is not devoted to a particular time period. It's just general. Talk about society. So everything from changes to flexing changes, or it says reactions to war over here, Army and families. Some other odds and ends here. You see a Wright flyer, and no surprise because the Wright brothers were in the bicycle business, but then they started working on aircraft, something lighter than air, something that could fly. And they were successful when they went over to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, around the edge of the Atlantic coastline, where there was consistent winds. They got off the ground there, but then they perfected and started improving their new creation, their new invention over there in Huffman Prairie. They're back in Dayton, Ohio, which is now Wright Field, or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that they perfected that over a number of years, and that got the attention of the U.S. Army. And the U.S. Army sent a contract out, request for a proposal, basically, asking for somebody to create something that the Army could use. And that included creating something that could go at least 40 miles an hour, could carry at least 2 people, 350 at least 350 pounds of 2 people, and also includes, be able to set it up in an hour's time and so forth. And there was many proposals that came in, and the Wright brothers ended up winning that contract. So that's why the Wright Flyer is here. So although they were not only the very first to fly, but also they won the very first Army contract for this vehicle. And what a great opportunity that was for the Army to finally be able to fly over, capture reconnaissance, potentially drop bombs, and so forth. This is one of the reasons why when you go to Dayton, in one of the nice areas, I think it's called Oakwood, there's some large homes, and one of the mansions over there was one of the Wright brothers, because it paid off. Their invention paid off. And that's what it speaks about right here. Wright Brothers Flyer. Okay, so just walking back over here. So you can see some of the displays off in the background. There's a Liberty truck right there. Yeah, so a lot of these displays right here, I'm just perusing this very quickly. Everything from commentary on Vietnam to Iraq, history, the changes in the Army, and so forth. So now I'm going to continue on where I left off. So once again, this section starts with, I started right here at the War Between the States, but then I was over here in the American Revolution section, and then went to the War Between the States, and now progressing on. Now the next section is primarily devoted to World War I, but also includes war with Spain, China, Philippines insurrection, Mexican, but mostly World War I through here. And this is where the displays, I think, just kind of are pretty much more engaging in some ways. Pretty fascinating, just some of the more interesting architecture. But you can find a lot of different things here. A lot of explanation of World War I here, and how that, all the elements, part of the elements leading into that, the German Army. So you see right here, very cool, a German machine gun right here. And here's a 1916 steel helmet. And here is a 1895 era helmet. And then, so you see all these displays on all sides. I like how it displays it. And then all these displays, everything from, you see the Hotchkiss machine gun, model 1914. You see a signal pistol right there, a grenade carrier. You see some hand grenades right here. See a German trench club and a rangefinder. You see a trench knife right here. This is a 1903 U.S. rifle, 30 caliber. See a model 1917 revolver right here. All these other artifacts, I'm just kind of perusing this. Boots and hats, caps, a folding lantern. It's kind of cool. It's an identification kit. There's a shaving kit right here. Here is a model 1917 steel helmet. Tennessee native wore this helmet. And of course, I'm just kind of passing through this kind of quickly. Of course, it's on both sides. Once again, if you're just joining me, I'm here at the National Museum of the United States Army here at Fort Belvoir. This is about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. So if you're ever in Washington, D.C., here's an option. Another option is the National Museum of the Marines, which is in Quantico. Quantico is about 25, 30 miles south of here. So another cool thing to go see. So here's some gas masks.
I was spellbound by the fact that here I was, actually going to war. What was before me now?
And this is really cool as well. This is actually all lit up, and I'm hoping the lights turn back on. But this is all glass. The floor is glass, the sides are glass. So you see over here, it's Pershing, General John Pershing. I just saw a photo of him. He was over there honoring Stonewall Jackson because Pershing went to VMI. He honored Stonewall Jackson. Here is a French FT-17 tank. Light tank.
As I came to learn more about the way the war was fought, I began to doubt.
So I might come back in here when the lights turn on. But you can see how this is really cool. I like how they the deco, how this is arranged here.
Suddenly, after a terrific explosion, the whole world was coming to a head.
So I'm just looking at this really briefly. Just lots of other artifacts along here. Everything from the whore belts, the insignia, canteens, and so forth. Over here, the pattern 1912 officer service coat. It's too bad there's a terrible glare here, but I'm gonna continue move. In fact, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go around here. I'm gonna go back through there. I think the lights will turn on here soon. So once again, I'm in the World War I section of the National Marine. I'm sorry, the U.S. Army National Museum. I'm just gonna stop here for a moment.
Whether a man makes it through or not, it's just sheer chance, nothing more.
The time for rest is ended. Though still weary, we press back toward the front. Will this war ever end?
All right, so lights are turning back on here. So you can see how this is arranged where, see the floor is glass. You walk over the landscape. It's supposed to be that immersive experience. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next section. I'm not spending much time looking at the individual artifacts, but moving on to the World War II section display area. Here at the National Museum of the U.S. Army, here at Fort Belvoir Army Base. This is just about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. Some displays right here. So you see how they have this display here, some different battles that were listed. Okay, so now we continue on over here. It says this section is listed as Global War, which is really World War II. So the American Theater, Pacific Theater, European, Middle Eastern Theater. The first thing you see right here is the Sherman tank. And also a cool display right here as well. This is a landing craft. So once again, this is all part of the World War II section, mostly. Of course, similar to the other ones, mostly focused on U.S. kind of artifacts and relics, but there's others as well. So you see a German steel helmet right here. See, this is a German Nazi Party brassard. It says this was members of the Hitler's National Socialist Party. And you got the German model 1936 dressed dagger right here. Italian model 1933 steel helmet right there. Italian fastest presentation sword. And here's some Japanese ensign right here. And the Japanese officer's sword, scabbard, and officer's sword right here. And a helmet. Some officer coats. This is of the Army Air Corps officer coat, for example, right here. So continuing on over here, there's other displays like this one right here. This is a Private Alamo Scout. You got others like this. That is a private at the 10th Mountain Division. So once again, it's shared with you. I'm going to continue on this way. Lots of different artifacts like right here. Everything from, you see some German pistols. Like for example, you see a German Mauser. And field jacket, Bronze Star, combat infantry badge, and so forth. See the German light machine gun and a Thompson machine gun, and also a model Browning automatic rifle, which are right here. Got some medical identification cards and so forth right here. Field medical supplies. See this display right here. It says 260,000 soldiers served in the United States Army during World War II. 318,000 died in the service of their country. 565,000 suffered non-mortal wounds. I'll go over there real soon, but some other things here. See a little section on Battle of the Bulge right through here. So you see everything from, there's a parachute badge and here's a telephone right here. Here's the telephone that they used. Here is a switchboard. Switchboard is right here. And it's got some other things like the M16 binoculars and the M1 aiming circle and the M1 gunner's quadrant telescope. And you can see those right here. I've seen these in pictures. Interesting to see these on display here. Ha! That's cool. And little cap. There's those binoculars right there. Here is a German assault rifle and a rocket launcher carrying bag. So here's a rocket launcher carrying bag. And right there is a German MP-43 assault rifle. Look at that. And some other odds and ends like shoes and so forth. All right, so making a transition over here. See, it should be remembered that, to put in perspective, there was a lot of those who died and suffered during this war. But across the South, to keep this in perspective, across the South, it was typically about 3 to 4 times more Southern Americans who fought and died in just their one war in the Confederacy than every other war combined. So worth keep that in mind. Typically when I go around, I love it when counties will actually place the names and list the names of those who served and died in different wars. And typically the list of names those who served in the Confederacy is typically about 3 or 4 times longer than every other name of every other war combined. Here is a section on Operation Dragoon. Of course, this is part of D-Day invasion of France. That's what this is here. Here's an obstacle. Soldiers encounter more than 5,000 of this type of obstacle at the beaches of Normandy. So, an obstacle just like that was this. So, the shape coupled with the construction and material of steel reinforced concrete could withstand the force of a tank. The Germans call these obstacles Betonnatur, however you say it. So interesting to see those up front and an actual authentic one. So some parachutes, some other artifacts here as well, including this M1 rifle, very popular M1 rifle, 30 caliber. Seen a few of those. I almost bought one of these a while back. That's a friend's. And here's some of these. You've also seen these obstacles that were all over Normandy, right? And the beaches of France. These things right here. Part of Operation Overload. Oops. It took place on June 6th, 1944. So, interesting to see these things up front. All right, I can't show all these, a lot of different artifacts. Once again, if you're just joining me, I am in the National Museum of the United States Army, and this is the building from the outside. This is on Fort Belvoir, just about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. But definitely lots of other artifacts here. I'm not going to look at all these right now. But you see the M1C commentary about the helmet and the M1 carbine, a 30 caliber M1 carbine, right? You can see right here, the M1 Grand, right? Very famous rifle. M1 Grand was the standard weapon of American infantry in World War II. General Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. So there's the M1 Grand. You can still find those on occasion to buy. Here's a converter. This is a mechanical cipher machine used by the U.S. Army. It's there to decode tactical radios and different messages like that. So it's a cipher machine. Here's a radio receiver and transmitter. And here is a message from one of the earlier versions of a phone. The Army made advances in radio and wire communications systems during World War II. So it's kind of, this is like a walkie-talkie, basically. So I'm not going to look at all these, some interesting stuff here. Let's look at these for grenades. This is basically an anti-tank rifle grenade, and also I'm not sure what that is actually. 5-gallon gasoline can. Some uniform of somebody from the captain of the 5th Air Force. Right there. Here's the backside. I'm working my way around this World War II exhibit here at the U.S. Army National Museum. I'm going to finish up this section right over here, but you will see other things like identification tags. Here's a Japanese steel helmet. Looks like it was hit right there. It says, easily pierced by shrapnel and bullets, as can be seen. Right here is a Japanese Type 92 machine gun. There it is, that machine gun. Also a Japanese Type 38 rifle and a Japanese 1,000-stitch belt. So there's a Japanese sword and the Japanese 14 pistol right there. And also the Japanese Type, this is a 38 rifle. There is the sword. Nice, some displays right through here. I'm not going to look at all these right now. Other displays. Japanese general's officer sword. All right, so moving on here. Here's the M1 Belvoir gun. It's basically an anti-aircraft artillery right here. You can see the Sherman tank, of course, in the background. And lots of other artifacts here. For example, here's the famous Browning machine gun. Cool, we see one of those, it's 30 caliber. It says right there, Browning machine gun, 30 caliber. Here's some field rations. Over here is this is a flamethrower. I just had one of these was just demonstrated out there at the Battle of Aiken, South Carolina. It's just out there, and after dark they had a World War II era flamethrower out there, and they're just demonstrating that there. So here is a portable flamethrower. You can see that there it is. I see a machete and a rocket launcher. Rocket launcher right here. So, got the rocket launcher and the machete right here. Different helmets here. M1 steel helmets. M1. For example, one right here. You can see these the helmets that were used by the U.S. Army. Some other pieces here. The United States, fragments of flags and stuff like that. That was at the apparently at the surrender of Japanese forces. All right, just going around here. I'm in the World War II section, of course, here at the National Museum of the U.S. Army. So here we are. I was just kind of moving my way out. I started this video down on the other end. You can see how it's broken up. The very first section over there is part of the American Revolution. And then the second section was part of the war between the states. And then it came over to World War I era. And I just left the World War II era right here. And now it continues on to the Cold War. So let's go over there. To the Cold War section. Here's some posters that were used for trying to recruit folks for World War II. And this is called Fighting for the Nation, Cold War. So this includes the Korea War, the Vietnam War. Definitely more unique deco in here. See, here's a private Berlin brigade. And part of the Cold War Army relics, like an M14 you see here, M16. Of course, M16 still use those today, still very popular. Looks a lot like those AR-15s. And another very popular rifle in the M14, of course, right here. This dates back to 1957. And other things here, some scabbards. Right here. And a little section on the threats of nuclear war. Okay, continuing on. It's the Vietnam section over here, but this right here, Korean War, we'll go this way. So the Korean War section, you have the Jeep. The Jeep made its first appearance on the battlefield in World War II. Yeah, actually pretty cool to have one of those. See, there's mostly just displays over here. Really short, concise displays. Just really, mostly just tip of the iceberg kind of displays, information. You really can't learn too much about the wars and the battles, but you can see some of the mainly artifacts and relics. Here's an M2 carbine, 30 caliber M2 carbine, and also a model 1918 Browning machine gun, a 30 caliber as well. You can see right there. Here is a Chinese type M24 rifle. And how about this? See some filled caps there, but this is as you can see, is a rocket launcher. In fact, it mentions it right here. This rocket launcher right here, designed in World War II, but not used in combat until the Korean War. So there it is, the rocket launcher, and also the practice rocket. And cool, here's a radio set that was used during the Korea era. Weighs 26 pounds. Its FM radio receiver and transmitter was first issued in 1951. Here is an M1 carbine, 30 caliber, with infrared sniper scope. Got everything from combat boots to field parka. There's a field parka right here. and some other things. Right, just tip of the iceberg. Just kind of going through this kind of quick. You have the field parka right here. Glare is terrible, but here you go. And right, got some other displays, like for example, we don't want to miss this. This is a quad 50 caliber quad, designed in World War II as an anti-aircraft gun, used against ground targets in Korea. Uses ground targets in Korea. That packed a lot of punch. I'm not looking at all the displays, don't have time for that. But moving on to the section on the Vietnam section. So displays, definitely just different folks who were involved in that. There's a little section here on the Huey helicopter. And the Huey helicopter was right here above. Some thick cables and support holding that up there. So some displays right here. Could definitely spend a lot more time if we cared to. Here another rifle, cool rifle. This is a based off of an AK-47. It looks like an AK-47. That's what would have been my guess. This is a Type 56 rifle, based off the Soviet-designed AK-47. Was used by enemy forces and captured by a battalion. Captured back in 1969. This is a Viet Cong stakes, sharpened bamboo or iron stakes, often covered with human or animal feces, were anti-personnel booby traps and placed in pits or near trails where ambush troops might take cover. So you'd hate to have one of those pierce you, right? Be walking along and have one of those, step on one of those. So different kind of, everything's from berets to combat coats right here. Here on this side is munition, cartridges, and so forth. And there is some information here, different years, different discussions about little brief synopsis of different years. So, don't want to bypass this right here. Here's a rucksack and a water canteen. Some body armor. You see some body armor, nylon rucksack, water canteen, medical instrument supply set, a compass right here. Here's the compass. There's that medical instrument. Here is the water canteen, rucksack, and of course the body armor right here. Here's a Vietnam soldier's load, typically what Vietnam would have. What you can see right here is the small arms ammunitions pouch. You see there's a water canteen here. You can see the equipment belt and the flashlight. You can see the combat field pack. There's a bayonet knife, a scabbard, protective mask. Still could find these, I remember you can still find flashlights like that, and you still find these when you go to military type stores. Here's other things, like you got some hand grenades right there. These are the M26 hand grenade and the M67 hand grenade. Let's see a practice kit. Actually, it looks like more like a radio set. Here it is, radio set. That radio set right there. And also, you can see right here what there is. There is a rocket launcher up top, and a grenade launcher, and an M16 rifle, and an M60 machine gun, and that's what these are right here. So here's the machine gun, the M60 machine gun. And also the M16, right? We recognize this, definitely recognize M16s. Looks a lot like AR-15s. And here is the grenade launcher. So the grenade launcher right there. And the rocket launcher right there. So some displays to some of the troops. I'm not going to look at all this right now. I can only see so much of this. So here is the Lieutenant 3D Surgical Hospital and also the 18th Engineer Brigade. Up there. And this is the soldier I think we're kind of most familiar with. It's a corporal, 9th Infantry Division. This machine gunner is on patrol with his squad in the elephant grass, streams and marshes in the Delta Republic of Vietnam in 1967. He is wearing a typical coat, trousers, and jungle boots, carrying an M60 light machine gun, nicknamed the Pig, for its bulkiness and appetite for ammo. This corporal is also carrying a belt linked with 7.62 millimeter ammunition. Looks pretty realistic, doesn't it? This is the Vietnam section. Now continuing on, let's move back out here. This is a Corporal 1st Armored Division. Now continuing on to the last display here. Once again, I'm here at this is the National Museum of the United States Army. This is the building, what it looks like. Here at Fort Belvoir, this is just a little bit, this is just about 15 miles south of Washington, D.C. So if you're in Washington, D.C. and want to go see the Smithsonian, there's a lot of places you can go see up there for free. Here's another place that's for free. The National Museum for the Marines is just south of here, about 25, 30 miles south of here. This, also the naval one. It's not, naval one is kind of struggling right now, but definitely worth seeing that. But here, this is this last one called Changing World. And basically this is the 1990 to present Changing World, which includes everything from the different expeditions, Kosovo, global war on terrorism, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so forth. That's what this section's all about. Operation Desert Shield. It was back in 1990. Here's some things recognized. Contamination kits, chemical protective gloves, protective mask, rifles. Here's a M16 rifle, a grenade launcher, and so forth. So the M16 we saw still being used. It's a workhorse. Some night vision. So artifacts, of course, used more modernly. All right, continuing on this way.
The Army's air-land battle doctrine.
The Apache helicopter.
Here is the Bradley M2 and M3 Bradley. Boy, tanks sure have come a long ways, haven't they? So let's go ahead and make the rounds. There's a display for this right here. M2, M3. The Bradley fighting vehicle. Nothing here about the Kuwaiti street sign. Saddam Hussein sign. I don't know where those are at. Oh, over here. Here they are. Over here is a Blackhawk engine. This badly damaged co-pilot's General Electric engine belonged to the first UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter to be shot down during the Battle of Mogadishu. On 3rd of October 1993, call sign Super 61, was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade while trying to capture a prominent militia leader. The ensuing 17-hour battle, popularly referred to as Black Hawk Down, left 18 Americans dead. In August 2013, nearly 20 years later, the remains of the wreckage was finally recovered from the crash site in Somalia and returned to the United States. So they finally got this down. The engine that was part of Black Hawk Down. I need to watch that movie again. Wow, need to see that. Here's those two signs. Saddam Hussein's sign. Some other things here as well. Uniforms that you still see. Desert camouflage. BDUs, ABUs right here. Aircraft landing gear fragment. This fragment from a lower portion of landing gear is from one of the aircraft that struck the New York Trade Center on September 11, 2001. How about that? This is actually part of the aircraft that actually hit one of the towers, World Trade Center towers in New York City. Wow. Just kind of going through these relatively quickly. See over here some other modern weapons. I'll show those with you briefly. It's an M26 shotgun, a carbine, semi-automatic pistol. Here's a squad automatic weapon, munition pouch, anti-tank missile, just so you can see what this is, including a machine gun 50 caliber. So lots of little displays, as you can see around. So here we got, this is called the early morning raid.
The working theory here is that this is the work of terrorists.
The aircraft penetrated all the way into the A-wing and the inner part of the Pentagon.
You can see here, just sharing this with you just briefly.
9/11 changed everything. Suddenly, the US
So you can see on here the radio control robot, aircraft system, UAS, a UAV, rocket launcher, Taliban motorcycle. There's a Taliban motorcycle right there. Now, of course, there's displays on both sides. I'm trying to cover it all, but we only have so much time. You can see the back here, back of a troop carrier. Well, it's not entirely a troop carrier, but it could, a little bit. Invasion 2003, section right here. I'm kind of going through this a little quicker pace right here. But you can see all these little different sections right through here. This is more modern, once again. I don't want to blow by this too fast. Huh. All the same uniforms I've worn in the past. So once again, where we just started out with the M2 Bradley right here. All right, let's move back out here. So once again, if you're just joining me, I think you know by now, but I'm at the National Museum of the United States Army. You open this packet up a little bit and it shows you this. But you can see right here, this is at Fort Belvoir, just south of Washington, D.C., right off of I-95. If you're ever around here, it's worth checking out. I share this stuff so you can see how it looks and encourage you to come out here, see these displays. And also I also wanted to take a look at particularly how the war between the states was portrayed, because I'm very skeptical with many of these museums these days. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up. But once again, this is just the main display. In fact, I might as well walk towards the main entry area while I'm here. Started off over here, American Revolution, and then the war between the states. Once again, I'm gonna walk just briefly, go back here, and then I'm gonna finish this video up as I walk out, get ready to walk back out. Once again, this is the war between the states section. For those of you who just missed it, there's lots of variety of relics that I shared early in this video. So I'm not going to share those all right now, but I'm going to start walking out towards the front wall, towards the front. All right, might as well start walking back towards the front. I figured I'd turn this on. This is trying to be a longer video than I was expecting. I figured I'd do this on YouTube. Hopefully they don't ban this or give me some kind of violation, some kind of content violation. They just did that. They prevented me from doing a live video recently at an actual living history encampment and reenactment over the Battle of Sailor's Creek. So here I am, just videotaping at the Battle of Sailor's Creek for the 160th anniversary. And the video suddenly stopped and I received a content violation for simply showing a reenactment of a famous battle site at a state park that was attended by reenactors and families. It's amazing that I was actually banned from doing live videos for a while on YouTube. So okay, I'm coming back out here. I'm gonna finish this up. So once again, just leaving this with you today from I'm not going to go through the National Store I'm not going to go through the store right now. But once again, I'm here at the National Museum, Army. Now there is a section upstairs too, but I'm not going to go there right now. But there's not much upstairs. I remember seeing that once before. It wasn't that much. So anyway, take care, y'all. Once again, from here at Fort Belvoir, National Museum, United States Army.